So when you think about where capitalism came from, a certain story probably pops into your head. But what if that story, the one we all kind of know, gets the most important part completely wrong? Let's get into the story you've probably never been told.
You know the picture, right? Brave merchants sailing off to faraway lands, trading silks and spices, and slowly, piece by piece, building our modern world. And it makes sense, it feels, well, natural. But when you really dig in, the historical record tells a much stranger, much more specific, and honestly, a far less inevitable story.
Okay, so this common idea has a name. Historians call it the commercialization model. And the idea is pretty simple. Capitalism is just what happens when you let trade and commerce do their thing. The theory goes that once merchants were freed up from old feudal rules, they just naturally started reinvesting their profits, looking for new markets, and boom, you get capitalism. The whole idea rests on this assumption that being a capitalist is just baked into our DNA, just waiting for a chance.
Right, but here's where that neat and tidy story starts to fall apart a bit when you look closer. The great historian Fernand Braudel, he had a totally different way of looking at it. He didn't see one big market, but three distinct layers of economic life.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Braudel actually separates the everyday market economy from what he called capitalism. For him, the market was ancient, local, competitive, pretty transparent. But capitalism, he saw that as the anti-market. It was like this exclusive members-only club at the very top, a shadowy layer of super powerful players, monopolies, and big-time financiers who could bend the rules and control global trade for massive profits. So, in his view, it wasn't an evolution. It was a completely different beast.
Okay, so what does this top-tier capitalism actually look like in the real world? Well, you couldn't ask for a better example than the Dutch East India Company, or the VOC. This wasn't just a company. It was arguably the world's first multinational corporation, and it is the perfect poster child for Braudel's concept.
This quote just nails the mindset, doesn't it? This was not about friendly competition in some open market. This was raw power. Jan Peterson Cohen, one of the leaders of the VOC, was crystal clear. For them, making a profit and using military force were the exact same thing. And the sheer scale of their operation, it was absolutely staggering.
4,785. Just let that number sink in. That's how many ships the VOC sent to Asia. We're talking about a logistical operation on a scale the world had never seen before. A fleet that could honestly rival entire nations. It's wild.
1 million. That's roughly the number of Europeans the VOC sent out to work the Asia trade. That is more than all of its European rivals combined.
And then there's this. 2.5 million tons. That's the sheer weight of Asian goods and, yes, tragically, enslaved people that this one single company moved across the globe.
And if you think, well, maybe others were close, just look at this. Next to its biggest rival, the English East India Company, it wasn't even a contest. The VOC sent almost double the ships and moved a mind-boggling 5 times the tonnage. They weren't just a player in the game, they were the game.
So here's the real kicker. The VOC acted like a state because, for all intents and purposes, it was one. It had its own army, its own navy. It could sign treaties with foreign powers. It could even print its own money. This is Braudel's top layer in action. Pure, concentrated economic and military power. But here's the twist. What if even this incredible story, this megacorp, isn't the real origin of capitalism?
All right, so another group of thinkers, with historian Ellen Mixons Wood leading the charge, says we've been looking in the wrong place this whole time. Forget the shits, forget the spice trade. She argues the real secret, the actual DNA of capitalism, was coded in the quiet green fields of the English countryside.
Okay, so let's put these two big ideas side by side. In a nutshell, the old model, the commercial one, sees capitalism as an opportunity that people freely chose. But Wood's theory, it frames capitalism as an imperative, a survival mechanism that people were forced into, whether they wanted to be or not. The key difference here is choice versus compulsion, a really big difference. Okay, to get this idea of compulsion, you got to think of society like a game, right? Every game has rules for how you win or, how you even stay in the game. That's basically what this term social property relations is all about. It's really just a fancy way of asking, what are the ground rules for just surviving? How do people get access to the land and the tools they need to live? And according to Wood, England developed a brand new set of rules that the world had never seen before.
And this slide, right here, this is the heart of the argument. See, in most of Europe, peasants either owned or had traditional rights to their land, but not so much in England. Here, you had a powerful class of landlords who rented their land to tenant farmers. But these weren't secure, cozy, long-term deals. They were competitive. To get and keep a lease, a farmer had to prove they could pay the most rent. And to pay the most rent, they had to squeeze every last drop of productivity out of the land. This created a relentless, constant pressure. Innovate, specialize, cut your costs, maximize your output, or get kicked off the land and face starvation. So for the very first time in history, the market wasn't just a place of opportunity, it was a mechanism of survival and extinction.
Okay, so we've got these two totally different origin stories. One about seafaring adventurers choosing to be capitalists, and one about farmers being forced to become them. So why on earth does a debate about 500-year-old history matter to us right now?
Well, it matters because if that second story, the agrarian capitalism one, is right, it changes everything. It means capitalism isn't some default setting for humanity. It's not the inevitable result of just letting people trade. Instead, it was a specific, artificial, man-made system that grew out of a very particular set of rules about land and survival in one country.
And that just leaves us with this huge, profound question. If capitalism wasn't inevitable, if it was, in a way, a historical accident, then does that mean the way our world works today isn't inevitable either? If it had a very specific beginning in the fields of England, can we imagine it having an end, or maybe transforming into something totally different? The story we believe about the past, it completely shapes what we think is possible for the future.